Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I am Kelso S. Duero, and together with me are my co-discussers, Mr. Miranda, Elvin Miranda, Miss Mariah, Meriam, Elauria. So for today's discussion, we're going to give you a summary and important informations related to the Marxism approach to culture. So, but before we go on to the intended discussions, we'll first discuss Marxism. So Marxism, we know that Marxism, during our senior high school days, it was the idea of Karl Marx. This idea became the basis for the theory and practice of what is known as communism. So Marxism is both the social, political, and economic philosophy whose aim is to examine the effects of capitalism, labor, and economic development, and argues for a worker revolution to overturn capitalism in favor of communism. So Marxism, it was an idea produced by Karl Marx in order to change the world, to cause changes in the current society, the current capitalistic society into a communistic society. So capitalistic society, it is a society in which the economic system is being controlled or is owned by private people, or there is private ownership related to the economic trade and industry. However, the view of communism or communism society, it refers to the economic system in which the economic trade and the economic industry is being, there is no private ownership and is controlled only by the said community. So that is the view of Marxism, which is to cause changes. So for me, I will be discussing to you about the classical Marxism. Mr. Miranda will discuss the Althusserianism and hegemony, and Ms. Elauria will discuss the post-Marxism and cultural studies. So for my part, which is classical Marxism, it says that every period in history is constructed around a particular mode of production. So this mode of production then defines the possible political, social, and cultural development of the society. So therefore, there are forces in which this force is the mode of production that causes the advancement of the society that we have. So classical Marxism is based upon the two ideas, which is the base and superstructure. So base is constructed, or it was divided into two parts, which is the forces of production and the relation of production. So the forces of production, it refers to the raw materials and the working class, while the relations of production, it refers to the relationship of the working class to the ruling class. Examples: the master-servant relationship, in which in this type of relationship, all the products that's produced is being owned by the master. Second is the boss-worker relationship, the CEO-employees relationship, and so on. While superstructure, it refers to the institutions that helps for the legitimacy of the so-called base. So therefore, in simple terms, these are the religious laws, the political norms, political policies, political laws, and so on, that is intended to legitimize the so-called base. So that is classical Marxism. So in summary, Marxism insists, this is a summary about Marxism or classical Marxism, in which it insists on materialism as the precondition of human life and development. This means that the creation of human society is based on materialistic things. It means that in order for the society to survive, in order for the society to advance, in order for human beings to survive, they need to produce the basic necessities in life needed to survive, such as food, shelter, water, and so on. The next is the primacy of historical development as the basis in understanding the class relations and social conflict. Next, Marxism in summary is the mode or means of production which can be easily understood as the social relations of production of society based on labor power and capitalist private ownership. So in a capitalistic society, this means that the advancement of civilization is based upon the labor power and the social relations of production. So social relations is divided, which refers to two parts or two divisions, which is the ruling class, or those people that's in control of the factories that needed for production, and the working class, or those people that work for the ruling class. That would be all for. Oh, there's another one. So lastly, Marxism and culture finds that culture is a social product, a social tool, and a social process resulting from the construction and use by social groups with diverse social experiences and identities, including gender, race, social class, and more. So this according to Oxford. So that would be for the classical Marxism, and for the next reporter will be Mr. Elvin Miranda.
So good day everyone, I am Elvin Miranda and I will be discussing to you the Althusserianism and the hegemony. So the Althusserianism. So the ideas of Louis Althusser have had an enormous influence on social theory and popular culture. As Hall suggests, Althusser's inventions and their consequent development are enormously formative for the field of cultural studies. So Althusser begins by rejecting mechanistic interpretation of the base or superstructure formulation, insisting instead of the concept of the social formation. So according to him, a social formation consists of three practices. First, we have the economic. Second, we have the political. And third, we have the ideological. So the relationship between the base and the superstructure is not one of the expression. For example, the superstructure being an expression or passive reflection of the base, but rather the superstructure is seen as necessary to the existence of the base. So the economic is determinant in the last instance never comes. So the economic is determined in the last instance, not because the other instances are its epinomena, but because it determines which practice is dominant. So, next slide, please. So, Althusser produced three definitions of ideology, two of which have proved particularly fruitful for the student of popular culture. So the first definition, which overlaps in some ways with the second, is the claim that ideology, or a system with its own logic and rigor of representations, images, myths, ideas, or concepts, is a practice through which men and women live their relations to the real conditions of existence. So by practice, I mean any process of transformation of a determinate given raw material into a determinate product, a transformation effected by the determinate human labor using determinate means of production. So according to Althusser himself, a problematic concept consists of the assumptions, motivations, and underlying ideas from which text is made. So in this way, it is argued a text is structured as much by what is absent or what was not been said as by what is present or what is said. So Althusser argues that if we are to fully understand the meaning of a text, we have to be aware of not only what is in the text, but also with the assumptions which inform it and which may not appear in the text itself in any straightforward way, but exist only in the text problematic. So next slide, please. So let's go on to hegemony or hegemony. Okay. So hegemony involves a specific kind of consensus. So first, a social group seeks to present its own particular interests as the general interest of the society as a whole. So central to the cultural studies, appropriation of Gramsci concept of hegemony. Hegemony is for Gramsci a political concept developed to explain, given the exploitative and oppressive nature of capitalism, the absence of socialist revolutions in the Western capitalist democracies. The concept of hegemony is used by Gramsci to refer to a condition in which a dominant class with alliance with other classes or class fractions does not merely rule a society but leads it through the exercise of intellectual and moral leadership. So hegemony involves a specific kind of consensus. A social group seeks to prevent its own particular interest as the general interest of the society as a whole. So that was what I've mentioned earlier. So next slide, please. So although hegemony implies a society with a high degree of consensus, it should not be understood to refer to a society in which all conflict has been removed. What the concept is meant to suggest is a society in which conflict is contained and channeled into ideologically safe harbors. That is, hegemony is maintained and must be continually maintained. It is an ongoing process by dominant groups and classes negotiating with and making subordinate groups and classes. So later on, Miss Mariah will further discuss about hegemony. So that would be all about my part. Miss Elauria, please proceed now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mariah Meriam Elauria, and this is a continuation of what Mr. Miranda has reported, which talk about hegemony. Hegemony is organized by those whom Gramsci designates organic intellectuals. This is to say that all men and women have the capacity for intellectual endeavor, but only certain men and women have in society the function of intellectuals. According to Gramsci, intellectuals are distinguished by their social function. It is the role of the organic intellectuals to produce their consent to do so. They work primarily to change and influence culture, morality, and political agendas. Next. The concept of hegemony allows students of popular culture to free themselves from the disabling analysis of many of the previous approaches to the subject. Popular culture is no longer a story-stopping, imposed culture on political manipulation, nor it is the design of social line and decay, nor it is something emerging spontaneously from below, nor it is a meaning machine imposing subjectivities on passive subjects. Instead of these and other approaches, hegemony theory allows us to think of popular culture as a negotiated mix of what is made both from above and below, both commercial and aesthetic, a shifting balance of forces between resistance and incorporation. Next. Moving on to post-Marxism and cultural studies. Post-Marxism is a trend in political philosophy and social theory which deconstructs Karl Marx's writing and Marxism is bypassing orthodox Marxism. Unlike traditional Marxism, which emphasizes the priority of class and the common humanity of oppressed groups, post-Marxism reveals the sexual, racial, class, and ethnic division of modern Western society. The term post-Marxism first appeared in Ernesto Laclau and Chantal Mouffi's theoretical work Hegemony and Socialist Strategy. It can be said that post-Marxism as the political theory was conceived as at the University of Essex, and Mouffe developed further by Louis Althusser. Next slide. Laclau and Mouffe are more Marxist than they are post-Marxist. They envisage a partnership between Marxism and the new feminism. the protest movements of ethnic, national, and sexual minorities, and the anti-institutional ecology waged by marginalized layers of the population, anti-nuclear movement, and atypical forms of social struggles in countries on the capitalist periphery. They imagine associating between Marxism and New Feminism, wherein Marxism deals with a form of inequality and arises from class dynamics of capitalism. It understands the class inequality as the primary axis of oppression in capitalist societies. Feminism, on the other hand, deals with another form of inequality, which is the inequality between sexes. In my view, cultural studies is post-Marxist in a positive sense, advocated by Laclau and Murphy. Next. And that was all with the summary of the lesson 4, which talked about Marxism.